You know, life wasn't all that great, and I was a terrible student. So the thought that I wanted to be a doctor and the kind of student that I was, they just didn't quite mesh. In fact, my nickname was Dummy. That's what people called me. And they loved having me in the classroom because no one ever had to worry about getting the lowest mark on a test as long as I was there. I was what's known as the safety net. But I didn't like it very much. But, you know, I was kind of kid. I was just there. And I got to tell you, it's a terrible feeling when you don't feel that you're going to learn anything. And you kind of tune out. You don't even pay attention. And it becomes a self-fulfilling program when that happens. You know, education is so vitally important. It's critical. In fact, it is the great divide in our society today. You can take anybody from any background, any ethnicity, and you give them a good education, and they can write their own ticket. And we have got to begin to emphasize that to people once again. You know, a lot of our big cities, the public school system, is not turning out what it should be turning out. And yet, private schools, homeschool, charter schools, much higher graduation rates and college matriculation rates. Why aren't the big city mayors and city councils grabbing hold of that and making sure that the students have choices in terms of the schools that they can go to? Because we need to get all of our students doing well, not just a small part of them. We only have 320 million people in this country. China has over 1 billion. India has over 1 billion. We can't afford to waste any of ours. We need to get all of them well educated, and we need to be able to look at the data that shows what is working, and we need to take advantage of that data. And that's one of the problems with our society. We have plenty of people who can gather data and put it together, but we don't seem to know what to do with it. We allow ourselves to be driven by ideology and special interests rather than by facts. And that's something that we have to get over if we're going to make progress in our nation. Well, you would have thought that maybe now all of my problems would be over. Wrong. Because when I got to high school, I ran into the worst thing a young person can run into. It's called peers. P-E-E-R-S. That stands for people who encourage errors, rudeness, and stupidity. And that's just what they were doing. Trying to tell you what kind of clothes you should wear, who you should be hanging out with. And I got caught up in all that stuff. And I went from an A student to a B student to a C student. My grades kept plummeting. I didn't care because I was cool. I was getting the high fives and the low fives and the pats on the back, doing the Detroit strut. You ever seen the Detroit strut? You know, sometimes I'm walking around and people say, "Are you limping?" I say, "No, that's the residual Detroit strut." And, you know, I just got so caught up in it. And one night I was complaining to my mother, my poor mother, about not having the fancy clothes. And she worked so hard. And she was so disappointed. Because, you know, early on I was this horrible student. And then because of the reading program that she put on us, I became a good student. And it was looking bright. My brother was doing really well. And she said, "Praise God, my boys are going to be okay." And now here I was throwing my lot in with all the others, being negatively affected by the peer pressure and going right down the tubes like everybody else. And she was so disappointed. There I was asking her for clothes. She was working her fingers through the bone. And she sadly looked at me and she said, "Benjamin, I tell you what, I'm going to give you all the money I earned this week, scrubbing floors, cleaning toilets, doing what everybody else didn't want to do. I'm going to give you the money. I want you to pay the bills and buy the food and take care of all the necessities, and with all the money left over, you buy all the fancy clothes you want. I said, all right, now you're talking. And I sat down and started allocating money for the bills and the food. And I ran out a long time before it came to clothes. And I realized at that moment that my mother, with her third grade education, was a financial genius to keep a roof over our head, any kind of clothes on our back, any kind of food on the table. And I realized that I was a fool. And I made up my mind that I wouldn't pursue the way of fools anymore. And I redoubled my efforts. In no time, I was an A student in school, and the guys didn't like it. They were calling me nerd, Poindexter, Uncle Tom, all kinds of things. But you know what? I would always shut them up by saying one thing. I would say, let's see what I'm doing in 20 years, and let's see what you're doing in 20 years. And they must have believed me, because when I graduated from high school, all those people who were calling me names voted me most likely to succeed, which means they knew what was necessary to succeed. They were too lazy and trifling to do it themselves. And that's a very important lesson that we need to teach to our young people. Don't get caught up with the peer pressure, but instead use that tremendous brain that God has provided for you. That brain which remembers everything you've ever seen, everything you've ever heard, can process more than 2 million bits of information in 1 second. With a brain like that, we need not concern ourselves about what we can't do, only what we can do. We were made in the image of God, and God is no dummy. God is the creator of all things.